Today is Tuesday, April 22nd, 2025. This is Quick Start from CBN News. I'm Dan Andros. The Pope's cause of death is revealed. We'll have that top story and more on today's podcast when we bring you news from a Christian perspective. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating. You can shoot an email right to our inbox, quickstartpodcast@cbn.org. We're all getting through the news of the crate together here each and every weekday, bright and early. We are very glad you are here with us, hanging out as we go through the news, see what's going on. Joining me today, Trey Phillips, Madison Seals. On the focus story, Madison, Colorado House of Representatives passed a bill that would create some legal grounds for the state to strip custody from parents who might be misgendering their children.
Yeah, crazy stuff, but we can't say it's surprising at this point.
Right.
And this bill is under consideration in Colorado, so parents there and really anywhere in the U.S. where similar bills could be considered just need to be aware of this.
Absolutely. We'll look forward to the details there coming up in just a moment. On the main thing, more disturbing Christian persecution happening in Nigeria. It's been rampant there. Joel Veldkamp from Christian Solidarity International is talking about it with Billy on today's main thing. All right, don't forget to subscribe to all of our CBN News podcasts, including a brand new podcast with CBN's Abigail Robertson, Heaven Meets Earth. You'll want to check that out. Link in the description of this podcast episode. All right, we're going to head to the news now in 90 seconds. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem had her purse stolen over the weekend at a D.C. restaurant. Her bag had $3,000 in cash, her passport, driver's license, checkbook, medication, makeup keys, and her official DHS badge. A masked white male is the suspect. Secret Service was there, but the thief escaped. Surveillance footage is being reviewed, but no arrests have been made. And Pope Francis's cause of death has been revealed as the Vatican reported that he died of a stroke and heart failure following recent health complications, including double pneumonia. He was the first non-European pope in over 1,200 years. And American Idol goes all in on Jesus for Easter. Then an Easter special titled Songs of Faith, filled with Christian worship and gospel music. Brandon Lake and Jelly Roll performed Hard Fought Hallelujah. CeCe Winans and Roman Collins sang Come Jesus Come. And Carrie Underwood closed the show with How Great Thou Art. Those are just some of today's top headlines. You can check out more stories over at cbnnews.com. And guys, that was something. I mean, I haven't watched American Idol in years, but saw the headlines after the weekend, and man, that's just, and I would assume Carrie Underwood had quite the influence on that, her being a believer herself, professed believer. So yeah, you love to see it though, using their influence to share the gospel.
Yeah, I think it was awesome to see all of the performances. CeCe Winans, obviously being kind of a powerhouse in Christian music, performing Come Jesus Come, and then having the opportunity after, when she's talking to Ryan Seacrest, to just share some of her motivation for why she celebrates Easter, why she wants to be on the Idol stage, not about herself, but to highlight the work the Lord is doing and the lives that are being changed as she's touring right now. She just was able to highlight some of the incredible things God is doing, which is great for people to hear, right? That all of this is about God getting the glory and the gospel being proclaimed.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so rare to see secular culture talk about Easter and anything other than, just the game and show of the day and the Easter bunny and the bright colors and everything. It's really cool amidst, stories like we're going to talk about in the focus here in a minute, just to see examples of exactly what we're celebrating on Easter, which is that the light shines in the darkness and the darkness has not overcome it, that Jesus is alive. He's still living in us and speaking through people. And this was just an incredible display of that.
Just quick straw poll here. How do you guys feel about the Easter Bunny? I'm over 50 now, and I'm officially done with the Easter Bunny. I've seen it enough. I've seen enough over the years. I have a visceral reaction when I see the Easter Bunny. Is it just me? Am I alone? Am I a curmudgeon? Am I the two Muppet guys up in the balcony there just yelling at everything? Or
well, Dan, I think two things can be true at once. I think,
Okay.
yes,
All right.
you are that. And also, I will say that the Easter Bunny, as I said earlier, I think yesterday now, there's no way to make the Easter Bunny not creepy. He's
Yeah.
just always going to be creepy.
Yeah. I think the older I get, the more wary I become of grown human beings in costumes, and the Easter Bunny one especially is just a little intimidating.
You know, there was a day when my kids were younger and I was an unwise parent. I took my kids to do the Santa Claus picture thing at the mall. You know, like they have like a huge setup, a zillion people there. You know, we've all seen it in A Christmas Story, and that horrific thing plays out. But I remember a couple of my kids they just didn't want to do it. They're like, I'm not doing that. No way. And at first I was irritated because I was like, come on, like just, we're here, we're in line, we waited, go do it. But then later I thought about it. I was like, you know what? I'm actually pretty proud of them. Well done, guys. Like why? Why would you go up to some clear person in a costume and just sit on there? Like I was like, you know what? You guys are making wise decisions here. Dad's the one making a mistake, sending you to this stranger to go take a picture with him. It's weird. So anyway, all right. Well, I'll keep my complaining to a minimum here. For everyone else, I'll just do it on my own time. But we're going to move over to the focus story for now. And the Colorado House of Reps, as we were saying there just a minute ago, passed that bill that would create some legal grounds. If you're a parent, you misgender your kid, quote unquote, they can potentially take custody away. So what's the purpose of this bill?
So this bill that's currently under consideration is called HB 1312, and it's being posed as a bill that would provide quote unquote legal protection for transgender individuals, which by now we're all aware of what that wording actually means, and that it's really a threat to people of faith disguised as civil rights. So what this bill does is add to the Colorado Anti-Discrimination Act that using a person's birth name or using their biologically correct pronouns would be considered discriminatory actions if that person doesn't think that they're actually that gender. The text of the bill says that dead naming, misgendering, or threatening to publish material related to an individual's gender-affirming healthcare services will be deemed coercive control and could influence courts when making custody decisions. So essentially, the bill would create legal grounds for the state to strip custody of children from parents who allegedly, I guess the state decides, misgender their child and refuse to affirm that child's gender identity. And the Colorado House of Representatives introduced the bill on March 28th, and they kind of rushed this whole process. So just over a few day span before the hearing, over 100 people testified against the legislation, but the bill still ended up passing out of the committee with a 7-4 vote, and then it was approved by the full House. So now it's headed to the state Senate, which is controlled by Democrats for a vote, and then on to the governor.
All right. So is anyone speaking out about this? I mean, because we're starting to see more and more of these things spring up around the country. So what's the reaction been like to this one?
Yeah, that's the good news, is I think people are more aware so that when something like this happens, people are ready to go testify. They're ready to be there and to stand up for themselves, their family, and their children. And that's really the best thing parents and citizens can do at this point, is to stay informed about the status of the bill and to reach out to state senators with concerns. And the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission and the Colorado Baptist Convention signed a joint letter expressing concerns about the law to Colorado senators. And they also distributed information to churches in the state, because this bill could do so much harm to children in so many ways that distributing information to churches and letting them know what's actually in this bill is a great way to get people informed and to activate them to go out and speak to their senators. And there have actually been cases in different states when child protective services have removed children from homes when parents refuse to quote unquote transition their child, whether it was through a new name and pronouns or through hormones and surgeries. Whatever it was, there have been cases when children have been removed from homes. And either way, the child suffers in the long run, and parents are punished for their values that don't even have to be linked to their faith. It's really just common sense to seek the best for your child by acknowledging the help that they need isn't found in sex changes or a new name. But under this bill, it could be considered abuse to seek any other measures. So there's multiple ways that parents can make their voices heard and take steps to protect their children from this radical gender ideology. And they can either sign on to a petition that already exists, like the one with Heritage Action, or talk to their Colorado senators directly. And Colorado won't be the last state for something like this to come up. So like we were saying earlier, it's a good thing for parents everywhere to be aware of.
Yeah, it really is. And, what's particularly kind of insidious to me is that obviously you're assuming these are school age kids because they're talking about custody. Can't have custody, once you're over 18 or whatever the legal age is, you can be out on your own and you don't have to be in custody of someone, right? You can just go out on your own. But so you're talking about younger teenagers, school kids and younger. And the idea that the school or the state can decide outside of the parents, like that should be the parents' realm. They named the child. And so it's kind of crazy to me that you can say, while that child is still a minor, say that whatever they decide supersedes what the parent has decided with their name. That's crazy to me. And I think that's just like one of those steps where you see the state or a school, a government school, thinking that they have more authority over a child than the parent does.
Yeah, I think stories like this are just despicable and disturbing to hear, that the government would have the authority to step in and do these kinds of things. I think it just shows the erosion of the value that we place as a society on the nuclear family. But the nuclear family is the bedrock of a culture. Without families as that foundation, you don't have a thriving society. You don't have a thriving culture. I had a conversation with Albert Mohler recently, and we have this clip up on our YouTube channel where he said, kind of tongue in cheek, but there's some truth to it, is he said, society relies on conservatives to be the ones who get married and decide to have children. And then we give them, unfortunately, to the liberals when they go to college, and they completely change their worldview. So he said, the world is relying on conservatives to propagate society, but then when they do that, they're chastised and ridiculed for it, and the nuclear family is often attacked as a result.
Yeah. Madison, final thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think that's a great point to make. And, we're seeing what we always refer to as the slippery slope. It usually starts out with something as innocent sounding as if a child comes to school and they want to dress like the opposite sex, then, we'll let them do that. We don't have to inform the parents. And that's actually another element of this bill, that if a child did end up changing, whether it's a uniform or regular clothes, whatever it is, they can dress like the opposite sex and the parents wouldn't be informed. Sometimes those kind of things don't seem like such a big deal until you bring in this new element of, well, actually the state could take your child away from you completely. Yeah. So that's why this slippery slope that we talk about is so important. And even what you're saying, Trey, that there's this whole method through college education and then afterwards to indoctrinate kids. So it's a very strategic plan that's going on. And the earlier you can catch it to protect your child and your family and the future of our, generations, then the better.
Yeah, absolutely important stuff for sure. Appreciate you putting it on our radar today on the podcast, Madison. And we're going to head now to the main thing. And Joel Veldkamp, as I mentioned earlier, who's head of international communications at Christian Solidarity International, is sounding the alarm on some new and pretty horrific attacks unfolding against believers in Nigeria. CBN's Billy Hallowell has more on today's main thing.
Joel Veldkamp, appreciate you joining me. There's a lot to break down right now in Nigeria. We've been talking quite a bit about persecution in Nigeria, how horrific it has become, especially over the past couple of years. But right now we're dealing with a heartbreaking and dire situation. Tell us what just unfolded there.
And what just unfolded there is the worst attacks we've seen in Nigeria in almost a year and a half. My coworker Franco got to the city of Jos in central Nigeria on Saturday, on April 12th. Every night since then, there have been attacks on Christian villages in that area. So far, about 126 people have been killed, we think, and over 7,000 people have been driven from their homes. So it's an extremely serious attack, one of the biggest that we've seen in this region for a long time, and it's coming in Holy Week, right? The worst massacre was on Palm Sunday, actually. 56 people were killed in their village by Fulani Islamic jihadists.
Do you suspect that because it's Holy Week that this is intentional, this attack, the timing of it? Do we not know?
I do suspect the last time we saw an attack of this size was Christmas 2023. In 2022, there was a huge massacre at a Nigerian church on Pentecost. So this is kind of part of the program now, that around Christian holidays, the attacks on Christian villages become more ferocious.
So we'll get into some of the ins and outs of what has led to this, but you have a contact on the ground, as you mentioned, and this is really important. A lot of times when it comes to these stories, you'll hear critics who say, well, we don't really know. We're not on the ground. We're relying on somebody telling us. It can be a game of telephone sometimes in these more difficult countries. But you guys at CSI, you often do have people on the ground. Take us through, and I know some of these details are difficult, so this is a warning for people as we talk about this, that these are horrific, difficult scenarios. What is your contact on the ground specifically seeing when it comes to injuries, when it comes to the effect? I want people to understand these are not just numbers. These are real people. So talk us through some of that.
Yeah, on Tuesday, my coworker Franco was able to visit the hospital in Jos and meet with some of the survivors of the massacre. And he said most of the people who are in there have wounds from machetes. So the attackers are actually using machetes to kill and to hurt people. He met a 7-year-old boy named Stephen, whose entire family was killed. His father was shot and killed. His mother had both of her arms cut off with machetes, and then she died, we believe. His 2 other siblings were both hit with machetes, and they were killed. Stephen was also hit in the neck with a machete, and they thought he was dead, so they left. And then sometime later, one of his relatives came to their house looking for the family, and they found just him and brought him to the hospital. And even in the hospital several days later, he was still screaming and vomiting from the pain of his wounds. We also met a woman,
a 7-year-old child, and this was a Christian family attacked in the midst of this.
Yeah.
You have to imagine what it is like to be a 7-year-old, to lose your entire family to this horrific attack, to survive going through this. I want people to understand what is happening to Christians around the world. Particularly, we're talking about Nigeria today. And I didn't mean to interrupt you. You were going to say something else, so I'll let you take it from there. But I want to emphasize how horrific this is.
Sure. Yeah, just another story that another person we met at the hospital is a woman named Naomi, who has 5 children. And their father and her husband was shot in front of them by Fulani jihadists on motorbikes. They just drove up, attacked the house, and shot their father. So these are some of the stories that we've heard firsthand on the ground in Nigeria this week.
So the Fulani jihadists, one of the things about Nigeria, and we've talked about this before, but I think this is still a very new topic for many people. You have a country, Nigeria, where almost half of the population is Christian. And so a lot of people would say, well, how is it possible that you would have a situation like this unfolding in a country like that? And I know that's a big question, but let's address that. And let's address what is motivating these Fulani, terrorists to do what they're doing.
Sure. Yeah, even though Nigeria is about half Muslim and half Christian, the ruling military class of Nigeria has always been Muslims from the Fulani ethnic group. And that goes back to the British colonial period, where the British made the choice to use the Fulani to rule over the rest of Nigeria, kind of as their middlemen. And when the British left, that structure stayed in place. What's happening now is we have this huge region of Nigeria called the Middle Belt, that's very fertile, that's populated by hundreds of different ethnic groups, almost all of whom are Christian and who are farmers. And we're seeing, for the past 6 years at least, systematic attacks on their villages by Fulani militias, who then, after they've killed the people and driven the people out, take their land and settle on their land. So we're seeing a slow process of taking a region that used to be Christian and turning it into a Muslim region. For the militias themselves, they get land, they get property, they get money perhaps. But for the Nigerian government, or at least for people in the Nigerian government, this is very convenient, because this means that a region where there used to be Christian opposition to their rule will now be cleansed, and they can control the whole country much more easily.
It's unimaginable that the rest of the world sort of watches on. And I want to address this and talk about this because America in particular, we had Nigeria on the countries of particular concern list, which is an important list through the State Department that essentially indicates which countries need to be monitored and maybe pressure needs to be put on. The Trump administration, the first time, added Nigeria. Biden administration took Nigeria off. Where does that currently stand? What are our hopes there? And what can America do? What can our country do to put pressure on the Nigerian government to stop these atrocities?
Yeah, America can do a lot, actually. Our relationship with Nigeria is quite strong. Nigeria depends on us for a lot of things, and we have a lot of cards to play. President Trump hasn't really begun his religious freedom program yet. He's still getting it going, but he just appointed his international religious freedom ambassador, Congressman Mark Walker, who by all accounts is a very strong individual for this role. But we really need to see action now from the Trump administration on this question. We need to see Nigeria added back to the countries of particular concern list that you mentioned. That should happen in a few months, that the new list will be announced. Nigeria needs to be on it. We know that Nigerian presidents pay attention to this list. They pay attention to their reputation in the United States. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that President Trump, I think, should call the president of Nigeria and say, look, I know what's going on. I've seen this and I'm not happy about it.
All right, some prayer points definitely for us there with concerns of Christians in Nigeria. So do be praying for that. All right, that's going to leave us with time for one last thing on the podcast today, and we're going to take a look at Matthew 5, 11, and 12. One we've done before, but appropriate today. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you.
Yeah, it reminds me of, I can't remember the verse reference exactly, but in 1 Peter 1, I think, talking about how all of these trials and things that we'll go through in life are hard and difficult, but they don't touch our salvation. Our salvation is secure and safe in Jesus, and that's a great reminder.
Yeah, and sometimes we joke that we know we're doing something right when we're getting attacked by secular culture, but this verse reminds us that is going to happen to believers, and the only place that we should be looking for affirmation is Scripture and the Holy Spirit in our lives.
Amen. Good spot to leave it on this Tuesday edition of the Quick Start Podcast. As always, make sure you're getting on over to cbnnews.com and faithwire.com for more news from a Christian perspective. Lord willing, that creek don't rise up on us. We'll be back tomorrow with more. God bless. See you then.